Hello and welcome. I'm Riki Stamps, Director of Programs and Events. And I guess I would like to invite you to our village living room. We're doing our best to come up with creative ways to entertain you in the safety and comfort of your home during our little COVID-19 crises. But today I would like to begin with interviewing residents and introducing you to certain residents you may not know. And this is something we hope to do several times in the next couple of months. And I appreciate you tuning in to this channel so you can be in tune with what's going on at the village. Over the years that I worked at Butterfield, I have met some very amazing, unique, and interesting people. And today I'm very honored to be interviewing Ann Prichard, third floor north resident. Ann? Ann's lived at Butterfield for several years, and Ann, you worked as a librarian and as the University of Arkansas Special Collections Reading Room Supervisor. And you were also involved in numerous community organizations, from what I understand, in Northwest Arkansas, including the board of the Fayetteville Public Library. And we have a lot of residents interested in the Fayetteville Library, and they've done amazing things, and I'm sure you were key in helping that as a board member.
It was the Friends of the Fayetteville Public Library.
Friends of the Fayetteville Public Library.
Others were on the board.
Okay. Today we're going to have a specific subject with Ann. Ann is the third generation landowner of a 168-acre historic Johnson farm that's located at the base of Kessler Mountain near Fayetteville, kind of around Greenland, correct?
Yes, that's it.
And I wanted to show you this farm. This is the Johnson farmhouse. And we're just going to try to give you a couple of visuals today so you understand when Ann is explaining and talking about the Johnson farm. And another subject we'll cover later on are some of the landscaping areas on the farm. But the main topic, and it certainly will interest you the most, is this amazing barn built by Ann's family in the 1900s, and it is on the National Historical Register for National Register of Historic Places. So Ann, we visited the other day about your homestead, your grandparents' homestead, and your story, and there's only one way to do it, and that's just to have you start back in the early 1900s with your family and bring us forward. So tell me about that.
Well, this is the story that I was told, oral history, but then I've been able to verify dates as time went on from letters and other people talking. But in the 1908, my grandfather lived in Everton, Missouri, just above the state line, and he and his family had a cash store, a general store that sold everything. And someone saw a pear on his counter and said, "Oh, are you interested in pears?" And the grandfather said, "Yes, my wife's family had pears when they were in Indiana." "Well, we have a pear farm. Would you be interested in buying a pear farm?" Well, they ended up trading the general store for 80 acres of orchards, having pears and apples on the east side of Kessler Mountain. And the water was good. There was a good spring. And the family moved down 1908, at Thanksgiving time. And they came on the train in a passenger car, and all of the furniture and the canned goods, the cow, and the beehives were in a boxcar. The oldest son went along in the caboose to take care of the cow, milk the cow each day, and take care of the bees, make sure everything was fine. Well, the passenger car came to Fayetteville, but the boxcar for some reason didn't show up for a few days. So the family, they were Johnsons, they stayed at the Johnson Mill house that's in Johnson. That was my great uncle. And finally the boxcar came, and they put things on wagons and went out to the farm. And it was not a very good arrangement yet. The house was sort of breezy. In the middle of the kitchen floor, there was a hole with cold air coming up in November. So they put the dishpan into the hole, just fit. And that solved that problem. But of course, they had to solve a lot of other problems. They lived there for many years, taking care of the pears. And that first winter, they ate a lot of turnips that were planted by the previous owner as a way of helping people get through the winter. There were rows of trees and rows of turnips, rows of trees, rows of turnips. That helped a lot. And eventually, they sold a lot of pears and apples in Fayetteville. They would go to houses, door by door, often to the back door, and sell pears and apples. And they got to know Fayetteville, and Fayetteville got to know them as the Johnson Pear Farm. In 1925, they were able to change that house into this house, which was very similar. It faced west, and the breeze is from the south. Breeze comes across this porch. It's very nice in the summertime, and now there are big trees in the front yard, so there's shade here. And that's the house that's there now, 1925.
So your parents were born in this house? One of your parents?
My father had already been born in Everton, Missouri in 1901. He was the youngest of 6 children. The other children had already received bachelor's degrees from Missouri State Teachers College and a master's from Missouri in Columbia, the University of Missouri in Columbia, in teaching. The mother already had a bachelor's degree from Shercliffe College in Indiana, and she felt very highly of having education and having degrees. And only one son didn't have advanced degrees, and that was Arthur, and he was known as a left-handed baseball pitcher. But he was the one who stayed with the farm and made sure everything was fine day after day. But in 1933, there was a 2-foot snowfall in the Fayetteville area in May. And we know it was 2 feet high because the wagons had a side board that was 2 feet high, and that was level with snow. It was a big, heavy snow that melted fast, but when it came down, it brought down the old barn. It collapsed the roof, and the barn was of no more use. So, 1933, my father had just finished a master's degree in landscape architecture and did not have a job during the Depression. That was not unusual. So he came back to the farm and was asked to build the new barn. And while he was there, he also built a pergola These are the piers of the pergola, and here are two seats facing each other, right here. There's a hole in the back of the seat for the watermelon seeds, and some steps down here. And this is on a slope to the east in the backyard. And they're flowers, they planted flowers, daffodils, and all kinds of things, crocus, all over the farm. They love flowers. This is the base of a black walnut tree, a Missouri black walnut that gets its leaves late and sheds its leaves early, and is a very fine, almost a champion tree. But then in the summer of 1933, my father had gone around to barns in northwest Arkansas to see what they should use, what would be the right thing to use. And he was a draftsman, so he drew up the plans, and they hired 14 local people who were thrilled to get a job at $1 a day building this barn in 1 month.
That's
in
amazing.
the summertime. Can you imagine the sound of it? Bang, 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 all day long. This is quite a large loft, and I remember square bales up in the loft. That's where the kittens were, and there was a way you could climb up into the loft easily. These windows here were for the mules and the horses, and these windows back here are where the cows would come in to be milked. They'd come up a slope, a stone slope here at the back, and I can still hear that sound of them coming in, clump, 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 and going to their stanchions. And then Uncle Arthur would milk the cows, and he'd shoot a stream of milk over to the cats in the corner, and he could hit the I thought that, I was a little girl, we lived in Houston, and I'd come up during the summertime, so I got to see a lot of wonderful things at the barn and in the house. This is a great big door, and at the back side there's another door that size, and the air just rushes through, and you can bring your tractors and wagons and pickup trucks, things through here. This door is smaller for the mules and the horses. This used to be enclosed in a fence that's not there anymore. So in 1 month, they got the stones from the rock wall that was up the hill, and they got posts from the veneer factory that was down the road at Fayetteville Junction. And these were the cores of black walnut. The veneer had been taken off as much as it could be, and left were these huge, wonderful, solid black walnut posts. And that's why the barn is still standing this many years later, because we've never put big circular bales of hay. There's no hay in the barn now at all. And so it's just empty. And it gets painted every once in a while. The last time was a few years ago by the same dependable painter that painted it 30 years ago when I first came to the farm.
So what are some fond memories you have as a child on this location, Ann?
I remember the quality of the soil in the road. It was kind of sandy, but it was smoother than sand. It had little, what were they called? An insect that made a little...
Doodlebug?
It was an ant of some kind, and it would make a cone shape, and then other smaller insects would drop in. And I loved watching the insects. And there were birds, there were chickens, and there were actually pigs in the front yard at first, but that didn't last long. But it was a farm. They had mostly fruit trees, but they did have fruit for their own use. But they had vegetables that they grew, and lots of flowers, always lots of flowers. And that was fun, to pick the flowers and bring them in and arrange them. And I had 2 aunts. There were 4 boys and 2 girls in the family. My father was the youngest, and the oldest son went off to the First World War and was killed in France at the Battle of Belleau Woods. His gravestone is in the National Cemetery here in Fayetteville, and he was greatly missed all of the decades after his death. It was a great tragedy, and his mother, when she said goodbye to him, she knew she would never see him again, and that was true. But the father brought the body back from France. I don't know how they did that, but he's buried in the National Cemetery, and every Memorial Day we take red, white, and blue real flowers, still real flowers, to his grave.
That's sweet.
And we think of history a lot in this family. We've always liked books. We have way too many, but that's okay. We have books on all kinds of subjects and textbooks from college courses and other books from the sales at the Fayetteville Public Library, of course. And it's just a wonderful place to read and feel the breeze flowing through from the south. It's a wonderful place.
It is a wonderful place, and your passion comes out in your voice.
And the older I am, the more I appreciate all the things that my family did, just the way they lived, the things they liked, the people they liked. And I have more gratitude as I get older. So I'm getting more and more interested. Recently, the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust here in Fayetteville created a conservation easement for my half of the farm. When my father died in 1991, there were 400 acres that they had gradually increased the farm to 400 acres, and my brother and I divided it, and he gave his part to the Ozark Regional Land Trust. Its headquarters was in Carthage, and now it's in Columbia, I believe, and it's mostly for the Ozarks in Missouri. So when the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust was created by Terry Lane, I thought, that's what I'll do, and I'll have a conservation easement. I can sell the land if I like, but nothing will be built on it. And supposedly, the land is worth less because it can't be sold for come and go and dormitories or anything. And so it's very nice to preserve the land and know that the birds and the animals will have a place as more and more Fayetteville is and the surroundings is built up. There'll be place, and we have way too many deer, raccoons, opossums, all sorts of things visit the farmhouse at night and in the daytime sometimes. And it's just the right way to treat land, I think. There are woods, and at the top of the rise toward the top of Kessler Mountain, there's a cemetery called the Reef Chapel Cemetery, and I will be buried there with my family. But my father's parents wanted to be buried at Evergreen because earlier the Reef Chapel Cemetery wasn't being kept up, but now it's being kept up by Frank Sharp, and it's in beautiful shape. Come and see it. It's quite old. They're box graves, and the earliest birth date is in the 17 something or other. But
That's
so
amazing.
many, all these decades, centuries after people have come across the United States and lived here and been buried here, there are about 100, over 100 graves. There's not much more room left. But it's a wonderful place to go up in any season. Of course, there are daffodils and other flowers in the springtime, locust trees, and one of the neighbors planted maple trees, one at each corner and one in the middle. When he came back from the Second World War, he planted the trees in honor of his sisters. Those were the Kellys, who lived nearby. The lightning has hit some of those trees, so they're not as many, but it's still a very special, quiet place.
Someone I know you're familiar with, a local Fayetteville artist, George Dombeck, came
Yes.
into your life. Tell us about that.
Well, I was having a piece of land surveyed, and the surveyor said, I know someone who's interested in barns. Would it be okay if he came out and looked at your barn? And we always say yes. People come out all the time and take pictures. So a few days later, here comes the surveyor with his friend. And I took one look, and it was George Dombeck. And I knew his work, and you all know his work, all those wonderful barns. But those barns have holes in the roof and in the sides, and that makes them sort of artistic, interesting. But I said, I'm so sorry, our barn is been kept painted, and it's white instead of brown. I hope that's okay. And he said, oh, not to worry, we can fix that. Meaning, if he needed to put a hole in the roof, he could. But he didn't. He made a wonderful painting that's now in the headquarters of Tyson's. And it's a square, about 4 feet square, and it's just white. It's from the front only. Looks like an architectural drawing, because of course he did have architectural training. And it's just a beautiful picture, very simple, white barn facade. And when I saw it, it was hanging against a wall. That hallway was painted a butternut squash color. So that was very handsome, with I think a black frame and the white of the barn and the white background. So that's very nice. But lots of people come out to paint the barn with watercolor or take photographs. Here's a photograph. Just this past year, Justin Elliott came out to the farm and said, oh, I love taking pictures of barns. Could I take a picture of your barn? We said yes, of course. We always do. And so he came back, but he came at night. I wasn't expecting that. So when he brought us a copy, which I always ask for, a copy of whatever they do, he brought this. And he had taken a picture at night with a camera that takes a picture every few seconds. He had been in an astronomy class and knew that if you pointed that kind of a camera at the North Star, you could get this kind of a wonderful circle of stars. And he also brought flashlights, and he put them in the windows of the barn. There are even windows up here, and there's a long, long ladder. And I don't think anybody's climbed that ladder in a long time. So I was kind of anxious about that when I heard it, but it was too late. He'd already done it. And look at that. Isn't that, I just think that's so wonderful. That's the Johnson barn at night. And there's
And what is the name of this photographer?
It's Justin Elliott.
Justin Elliott. Okay.
He's an appraiser, I think in Springdale. I've got his phone number if you need it. A really nice young man.
Very, very artistic. I'm sure the barn has appeared in various publications, but one of the most notable claims to fame is your interview with PBS. And
Oh, yes, for the Back Road Barns. There was a video of barns in Arkansas. Kenneth Clark did it. He came up from AETN, and we went out to the barn, and he told me what he wanted to do. So he came back later on his own, so he could just stay and look at different situations. And he did a wonderful job taking the pictures for that video, and it was just broadcast again recently, and someone said, "Oh, I saw you on an interview with about the barn." And so that turns up now and then. The white barn, most of barns are red or no color at all.
So in the PBS film, it has, they go inside the barn.
Yes.
And you can see a tractor and
Yes.
some glass bottles and stuff.
Yes.
Is all of that still there?
Oh, yes. Yes, you go inside and it smells like barn. It's just very special. And if you go up to the loft, it's one of those experiences you don't forget. It's beautiful wood arching up, long pieces of wood and down to make this wonderful shape.
Well, your careful thought of preserving this land, Anne, is amazing, as well as your brother's.
Yes.
Because to me, Arkansas is natural. That's just who we associate our state with.
Yes.
And the fact that caring people like you want to preserve these beautiful homesteads we appreciate it very much.
I think a conservation easement is the natural way to go, because you can sell it if you find you need to, but you can keep it in the family, and it's preserved. It's on the records that things will not be built there. And so you have an idea as you get older and you wonder what will happen to your land, that it will be preserved. And the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust has just been very successful. They've started out with 3 employees. Now they have 9. There's so many people wanting to have a conservation easement, and call up Terry Lane and find out how simple it can be. They did a wonderful job taking pictures all over the land that I'm preserving. And the cemetery is going to be recognized separately. That's part of the conservation easement, but it's going to have a separate designation by the people in Little Rock who did a homestead district designation. This says, the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program hereby certifies Benjamin Franklin Johnson II, that's my grandfather, Homestead District. This includes the barn, the house, the fields that had the trees, the orchard trees, and it's now been entered in the Historic Register of Historic Places by the United States Department of the Interior under the auspices of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. Earlier, the barn had been put on the National Register by Cy Sutherland and his students. That was before my father died, that happened. So that was very nice. And I think that you can see a plaque right here that tells that that was put on the National Trust in 1966. And my father was very pleased because he had designed it and kept it in good shape all those years. And it's just so lucky that I happen to be in that family, because I've always enjoyed history and preserving things and never throwing anything away. So we've got lots of letters and other diaries and notebooks about the history of the farm, and it's all just flowed together very naturally to have the barn on the National Register and to have Homestead District. And I'm just very happy that that happened during my lifetime.
I'm sure you have plans for your letters and family
Yes.
papers. If I know you, you're going to do something wonderful with those.
I have an archivist helping me. He's doing most of the work, of course, but I preserved all this stuff that was left. I knew that it was valuable, boxes and boxes of letters and diaries and ephemera. And now he's organizing it and creating a finding aid so you can find stuff. He's very good at it. He used to work at Special Collections and at the old Washington County Courthouse. His name is Tony Wapple, and it's just a delight to work with him, making this ready to give to Special Collections. I wanted to do it myself, to be in charge of having each letter looked at before I gave everything to Special Collections, just in case there were some photographs or some papers that we needed to put in a special place. And so that's what we've done. And it's been lots of fun, and it doesn't take forever. So gradually, things are falling into place, and I'm grateful to everybody who's helped in Little Rock to put this farm in a homestead district, and then to have a conservation easement, and then to put the records in Special Collections in the next year or so.
That's
And
going to
then-
be so nice.
Then I can die. I think I've done I've done what I should do.
Well, again, your love for your family's history and the farm is just very heartwarming. And we're so thankful that you shared it
Oh.
with us today. How often do you visit the farm?
Oh, before the coronavirus happened, I would go about once a week. I have the most wonderful person living at the farm. She's terribly grateful to be there, and I'm terribly grateful that she's interested in flowers and rocks. And she mows the grass, and she takes good care of everything. And how lucky can you be to live at Butterfield and have people helping you?
What are the chances of us possibly taking an excursion to the farm
Yes.
with a small group of residents?
As soon as the coronavirus has been declared a thing of the past, we will go out when Riki can organize it, and we'll go see the barn, and we won't have to get out. We'll just go out and
But if we wanted to get out and have a picnic, would that work?
no.
No?
Of course, this is Arkansas. There are too many ticks and chiggers. That's why it's the natural
We'll stay
state.
on the bus.
Yes, I think it's, and the ground is very uneven. And I went out one time to pick daffodils with some elderly people, and I realized that that was not a good idea. It was too, the ground is, we have armadillos, of course, and gophers and other varmints, and it's not good for walking if you're elderly. But we can stay in the van and see everything. We can go up to the cemetery. We can see where the fields are that had the orchards, and it'll be a nice trip, just 15 minutes away from Fayetteville. We could probably go out there and come back within an hour. So
Be a very nice trip.
June, the pear trees won't be in bloom, but there are trees everywhere, and it's always nice, and you can see the rock walls, and whatever there is, there'll be deer, some maybe. The raccoons come at night, and the possums come at night. We won't see those,
We won't see those.
but it'll be very nice.
Well, Ann, thank you so much. I
You're most
appreciate you
welcome.
sharing. I would like to remind everyone that you can look up the PBS production of Backroad Barns of Arkansas. What we're going to attempt to do after you and I have said our goodbyes is we're going to show the clip portion of your interview
Oh.
in that YouTube. And
That's
so
nice.
residents can see that in their home on their TV. But you can also YouTube it yourself if you would like to watch it in its entirety. So thank you again. I appreciate you so much.
You're most welcome.
And I would like to let our listeners know that the next interview will be with resident Mary Vaughn. And Mary was born and raised in Tawnytown, and we're going to hear her story of family in the area and how she became a photographer. And she's a very talented photographer as well. So thank you again. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Ann, thank you.
And thank you, Riki. Goodbye. It's a wonderful barn. It's wonderful to have as a center point for the farm. It's wonderful to go inside and it's dark, and even in the back there's a certain smell of cows being milked. I don't know how that's possible. My imagination maybe. We're in Washington County, Arkansas, south of Fayetteville, at the Johnson Pear Farm. My father had designed the barn. His name was Ben Johnson. He got a master's in landscape architecture from Harvard. He and his brother, Arthur Johnson, went around the neighborhood and decided which things they liked about the barns in the neighborhood, and then my father could draw a plan for it. It was built in 1933 during the Great Depression. It was built much too big for this family, but it helped the neighborhood to have people employed making the barn. There were 14 people who helped, and it only took them a month. They earned $1 a day. People in this neighborhood had gardens, so they weren't hungry. There were no soup lines. There was a lot of trading of food back and forth, but nobody had nickels and dimes. So to have $1 a day was a real treat, and they were happy to come and work on the Johnson barn. And here it's been since 1933. I remember the square bales being in the loft. It's a wonderful loft, big, and they were stair steps, and we could go up, and that was fun. And there were pigeons flying in and out, and there were cats, of course. And I can remember cows coming in the back door, clump, clump, and being milked, going right to their stanchions, being milked, and Uncle Arthur would squirt milk into the cat's mouth. I thought that was pretty nifty.
Anybody that's been on a farm that's got livestock